Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to the Beyond Bitcoin bonus show. Yo, we've got a special guest today, but I want to remind you, strong hand, long-term thinking. Bitcoin is next Bitcoin. Personal responsibility is the new counterculture. Conviction, we're going to talk about that a lot today since it's Beyond Bitcoin. We'll talk about some Bitcoin too. All right, so everybody knows that I travel all around the world. I meet people from all over the place. You know, someone watches my show in Asia and they say, hey, come visit me in Asia, or somebody in Europe, come visit me in Europe. And, you know, rarely do I get to, a lot of people want me to visit and everything. But it just so happens back in 2018, I was in Norway, and there are quite a few people in Norway who know me and were like, come visit. So I visited a meetup in Bergen, and then I was in Oslo for like 3 days, I think. I think I was only in Oslo for it was very short. Oslo is more expensive than Bergen, I can tell you that. And so I was only there for a little bit of time. And I met up with Morten here, who's watched the show for quite some time, and some other dudes that were with him, and it was a pleasure to hang out with him. And he told me a very interesting story, and I have referred to his story many times, but you guys don't know who I'm talking about. I mentioned the guy from Norway who moved to Malaysia because, well, he couldn't take Norway anymore for certain reasons. So, Morten, welcome to the show. I think I've given you an appropriate introduction. And so the world is wondering why you lived in this oil-wealthy socialist paradise in the north, and why you chose to move to a Muslim country in Asia. The floor is yours.
Yeah, you're right. It's a Muslim country, and it's quite different from Norway in most respects, you can say, to say the least. What I thought is that Norway doesn't necessarily fit with my ideal society, even if it makes a lot of money and everybody has heard of it, probably, or at least Norwegians think so. So I think for me, it's the degree of feminism that is very strong in Norway. And also, I felt that direction towards socialism. So Norway is not a socialistic country at all, but what I see and read and hear from people, and also looking at the polls, it goes in a certain direction that I didn't really appreciate. Also, it's a bit of the conformity that I think that Norway is a very closed society where everybody is supposed to think the same. So if you stand out, if you say something different, then it's not necessarily well received. And then again, it's the economical future of Norway. Norway is, of course, very, very rich from the oil, but maybe not many people even know it, even in Norway, that only the pensions for the state people that are employed by the state, it overshoots the whole oil fund. So I saw a direction that I didn't really like.
Now, you say the country is not socialist. There are a lot of socialist types, left-leaning people in the United States who love to say that Sweden and Norway are socialist and the United States should go in that direction, et cetera, et cetera. What I do know is that it's a high-tax country, okay? Let's call it that, high tax. And you are a Bitcoin guy. Now, I guess it's a two-part question. What got you into Bitcoin? And tell the world about how Norway treats Bitcoin.
Yeah, like you have the wealth tax, which will take away actually 0.85% of your whole wealth. So especially if you're really rich, you will take a punch from that, and that goes to all assets. So it's money you have in the bank, stocks, property, and also Bitcoin. So in that respect, Norway might not be the ideal country to treat Bitcoin as well, because let's say Bitcoin shoots up at the 31st of December, then you're supposed to pay a big tax out of that. next day it could possibly crash. I mean, I don't think it would, but if it does, then you have paid tax on something that you didn't even get anything back from.
Now, something important. Once you moved away from Norway, were you no longer under their tax regulations? Because here in the United States, if we move away, we're a tax slave to the United States forever. We just can't give up our citizenship. They don't let go of you at all. Did you give up your Norwegian citizenship, or do you still have to pay Norwegian taxes? What's the story with that?
Yeah, you will still have to pay Norwegian taxes if you move out, and that actually goes for a long time. It goes for 3 years minimum. But you have the tax agreements, and between some countries, the tax agreements are very favorable. So between Norway and Malaysia, those tax agreements are very favorable. But still, the wealth tax would be something that you have to expect to pay for.
Oh man.
For several years. So I guess it's not that different from the US in some respects. Maybe the US is a bit different because then if you are a US citizen, you have to pay tax to US forever. Yes. But in Norway, it stops at some point.
But so you have to pay this wealth tax still. You have to pay the wealth tax to Norway at this, even on the, even though you live in Malaysia, they still expect you to pay.
Yes, so wealth tax is still valid. It's not just to move because they have made sure that it's not that easy.
All right, now I want to go into one thing about the Bitcoin. You were politically interested. You had some interest in politics back in your day too. You were a member of a political party. Is that what got you into Bitcoin? I forgot now. What was that the connection? So talk. First of all, pound that like button, people, because hey, you're getting some Beyond Bitcoin Norway truth here. But yeah, to discuss the politics and Bitcoin there.
Yeah, like Norway is is very high taxing everybody, and that's one of the main reasons why I was involved in that party. So this party is for free individualism. The state is there for serving you, not the opposite. So I was not that happy about seeing Norway go in the other direction. Other than that, I don't really have a lot of facts about how Norway treats Bitcoin, because it's even in the process. As you have mentioned before, like dividends is a taxed or not. I mean, everything is still in chaos. Yeah, so I don't know if Norway treats Bitcoin much worse than other countries. But in general, to have this wealth tax is, and Norway is one of maybe 10 countries in the world that has this, and it pushes out the rich people. It pushes out the most productive people.
Yeah, they move away. They don't want to pay the wealth tax. They go to some other country. So so you moved to Malaysia. What are some more popular destinations for people that are fleeing taxes to go to that are Norwegian?
I think Malaysia is a very good country because it doesn't have any capital gains tax. So in that respect, it's better even than the US, I think.
Of course.
So Malaysia is pretty good when it comes to taxes. It's actually very good.
But not
Singapore, of course, also would be.
But the question is, like, not many Norwegians move to Malaysia. Okay, so where do they move most of the time? To Spain, is it? I mean, I saw a lot of Norwegians when I was in Spain. I know that. What's a popular destination for Norwegians to move to?
Yeah, I think Norwegians are so sure about their own country that they don't actually move a lot. And if they move, then it's because of that they get an expatriate to some country, not moving for a fixed forever kind of. So it's very rare that people do that to any country. But I guess US is more typical country to move to. But it doesn't really happen that often. Like Norwegians are usually very proud of their own country. They think that it's the best, and the UN tells them every year that Norway is the best country to live in, and that seems to stick. So my objections towards Norway, it's not many Norwegians that share them.
I'll say, I mean, it is a beautiful country. It's a peaceful country, but there, as you said, it's kind of becoming a little bit feminized there. You refer to that. It seems like the whole world is becoming feminized, and we discussed this a little bit over Twitter some. What is your take on the lack of masculinity in this world right now? And people, it seems like a lot of people just bow down to what their government says to do.
Yeah, that's a pretty difficult question, but I can say that Norway is in the lead when it comes to feminism. So if you think US is bad, then come to Norway and see how it is there.
Really? Okay. Give us an example, I guess, of something that's kind of that'll blow people's minds, I guess.
Yeah, it's for example, if you go to a high prestige study, you will get the bonus points for being a woman, which I think is probably true in the US as well. But also professorates, to get a professor, you get bonus points for being a woman. And what we see in Norway is that actually there was a survey, which is not from the alternative media or anything, it's from the state, showing who contributes most to the country. And from that one, we can read that Norwegian men, they contribute with plus $10,000 per year, approximately, while females contribute with minus $5,000. So I don't have many more specific examples to give you than the bonus points you get for university or the professorates, but also the general media, the way they say things. They like if a female gets a leader, they will show it to you. They will really be sure to say that this is really awesome that the female is a leader. And also our government is ruled by 3 women. I will not say that's because of anything, but we have a very high degree of women in high positions in Norway, high political positions, and it makes you wonder.
You have a state. Is there a state-run media there? A state-run channel?
Yes, exactly. I wanted to get into that point. It's NRK. I just checked the facts. It's about 3,500 full-time employees that works in this channel. It's a purely state-owned broadcasting channel, and that's a lot of money that needs to be paid to those guys. So that's forced upon you to pay for their broadcasting. I'm not really happy about their broadcasting. So it was actually a problem for me to pay that much. It's about like $300 per year actually, that each and every one with a television set had to pay. So. Oh
my God. So yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. Like, in order for you to get TV, you have to pay a TV tax, don't you? In order for you to,
you had to. They changed the rules just recently, but until like for the last 20 years, you had to pay for having a TV because that proved that you had the right to get NRK, and that is very outdated, obviously.
Yeah, very. The thing is, I mean, it's horrible. You have to pay $300 a year to support NRK. What you didn't exactly say is, what type of shows does NRK promote? I'm sure it must encourage that feminist slant, I would assume, because if the country is becoming more and more feminized, it must be because they're seeing stuff. They're seeing examples of it somewhere, and I would assume state-run TV might be putting it in people's face. Am I correct about that?
Yes, you are correct about that. And also, like sometimes NRK has very useful shows that I love to see also. But there is this actually feministic tune to it all. And I haven't seen any NRK show anytime that really promotes capitalism and shows the benefits of capitalism. And not only NRK, the state always also gives a lot of support to media channels that are approved by the state. And this is even worse in my head, because the small media outlets that are not kind of good enough to be approved, they will not get this money. But the ones that are approved get it. So it means that the small, like, alternative media that maybe even promotes capitalism, they have to get self-served by advertisements, while the others don't. So what could go wrong?
Exactly. So the others are state funded. Okay. So in Malaysia, let's go to Malaysia now here. Is there more innovation going on there? Is there more freedom of business and more creativity? I mean, how's it been there the last year or two, or however long you've been there?
Yeah, I've been here 1.5 years, a little bit more than that. And my main purpose was to go to a country with lower taxes, because I think taxation is theft. And the less taxes they have, the more innovation you will get. And I am not a Malaysian, so I'm not the perfect one to tell you like how is innovation, and I haven't read that many like insight informations about Malaysia to be the best one to say. But in my head, it's obvious. If you have less taxes, if you have no capital gains tax, come on, like what does that do with innovation? And I can say also that I see buildings are being made all around Malaysia. So I only have the visual impression to give you an answer to that.
Yeah, you're in Kuala Lumpur, right? That's where you're at?
Yes.
And they've got tremendous buildings there. And it is amazing. I mean, I've never been there. And I call it a Muslim country because I believe that's in its official title, but there's no strict Muslim rule. I mean, when you say Muslim country, there's a big range. I mean, it could be like yes. Iran or Pakistan, or it can be like where you are, or some former Russian republic, Soviet republic, that the people might be Muslim, but they're really, I mean, there might be mosques and stuff around, but it's not like they practice Sharia law or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. There is a big difference between Muslim countries. You're completely right. In Malaysia, you have some cities that I think are really, really, you can say, fundamental Muslims, or Muslim cities. But in Kuala Lumpur, it's less. So I think the average in Malaysia is 60% Muslims, but in Kuala Lumpur it's 50%. And also in Kuala Lumpur, you don't see this Muslim, there is no Sharia law that you actually see. For example, the law against drinking alcohol, it's only valid for Muslims. So it's not valid for me, and that goes through the whole, actually, in all the regulations, as far as I'm concerned, at least almost. Then the strict regulations, they go only for Muslims. So it doesn't really.
Yeah. And how would they even enforce that on certain people, I wonder? I mean, it's not like does the bar ask you, are you Muslim? I mean, how does that work? Or
I'm not really sure, but what I see here in Kuala Lumpur is that it's like any other business center.
Yeah,
you have people from all over the world that kind of pushes the city to be more, you can say, mainstream in the good sense.
Western. And that's another one of my questions.
Western.
Do you think because of Singapore's proximity that I pronounce it weird, Kuala Lumpur tries to emulate Singapore? It's trying to compete with Singapore on a certain level, isn't it?
Yeah, what I see at work is that I work with a lot of engineers from Singapore all the time. And it was actually a member of my previous party that said that it will affect, like if your neighbor country is really, really successful, it will affect your own country. And I think that's happening.
Well, and so let's take that to another level. Sweden is a lot like Norway, isn't it?
Sweden is very similar to Norway, exactly. except for the oil and gas benefits.
Okay, so I want to go. In Sweden, they took a different approach to the virus. They just they weren't as strict with people. How strict had they been in Malaysia, and how strict were they in Norway?
In Malaysia, they were very strict, unfortunately. So I have been actually a prisoner in my apartment for the last 2 months. It's a nice apartment. It's a 4-star apartment, but still I'm a prisoner. I can't run outside until actually just a couple of days ago. So they came late into doing all these restrictions, but yeah, you can say unfortunately they really went hardcore on it. So Norway in that respect would be actually better, because at least they gave some loopholes to, let's say, people working offshore. They can come in and out even if they live in another country. Some other examples like that. And actually you can walk outside. Like you have the right to walk outside. Here, actually, we didn't have the right. So I was a bit frightened just a couple of weeks ago, because somebody said that if you don't have a passport and you're a foreign employee, then they can put you into some immigration central that is worse than a prison.
Oh my God. Hey, you did mention that you've got a 4-star apartment, all right? In Oslo, how much more money would that apartment cost than it does for you there?
Twice
as much. Oslo, cost of living is, I guess it's basically twice as much in Oslo than in Kuala Lumpur. It's very interesting. As I said, Oslo is very, very expensive place from what I recall. And I was going to ask you have you been to Bergen before? I don't know if we talked about that.
I haven't been there for a long time.
Okay. So it's just not a thing for the Oslo people to go visit Bergen. It's just not necessary.
Yeah, actually it is. Like if you want to see Norway, there are many places in Norway that I haven't really went to, because I'm from Norway anyway, so I didn't really explore Norway. But Bergen is one of the nicest cities. So if you would take a trip within Norway, then Bergen would absolutely be that would be one of the main targets.
Now you are an observer of America, and I think you're happy to see that some Americans are standing up to this lockdown. What is your take? Growing up in Norway, there actually was a few years ago, unfortunately, there was a gun massacre of some sort, wasn't it? Was that in Norway? There's no Second Amendment in Norway. Okay. Malaysia too. I don't think you can be walking around with a gun either. If they could lock you up in your darn house for a week, obviously the people don't have guns there. So what is your take on the Second Amendment and guns and what that brings for freedom to people?
Yeah, I think after watching what we have all watched the last 2 months, I think Second Amendment is much more appealing to me than it was before.
There you go. So, what is the rule in Norway in terms of owning a firearm? What is can you own a gun there? Is that even possible?
You cannot own a normal gun that is for self-defense, but you could, until pretty recently, like 10 years ago, you could have your gun at home as part of the militia. Norway had a very big militia that were supposed to defend their homes in the case of a crisis. So there you can actually have a pretty badass gun. But it's not meant for self-defense. It's meant for, in case the government tells you to go out, then you can do it.
but they got rid of the militia rule. They got rid of that, though, you said.
Yes, so now people can't have guns at home. Only if you hunt deers, you have the right to have guns. So Norway is actually not the worst country when it comes to that, but it's getting worse. So it's a slope I talked about. It's a direction of the country that I'm not really a big fan of.
What's the deal in Malaysia with weapons?
I'm not sure, but I think you cannot own your own gun.
You know, so when you're walking around the streets of before all this happened, okay, I guess it's a pretty big international city. So there are other. You're a tall guy. I mean, you should stick out above the crowd there. But do people come up to you and stuff?
Not that often, but it happens to a friend of mine from Poland, which is even blonder than I am. He's much blonder. He gets asked to get pictures of him quite often, but he's really, really blonde, so he really, really sticks out.
Yeah. Okay. But there are international businessmen there, I would assume, from all over the world. Other white guys on the street. I would think there's a few at least. Although when I was in Singapore, there weren't that. I mean, I remember when I was in Singapore, people would look at me, and I'm not blonde, but I'm white, so it's interesting. It's an interesting. I'm trying to get because it is a culture. It's a completely different culture. You've gone from this blonde hair land to this Asian land. Malaysia is so much. So much different looking than Norway, and the I mean, just the whole. It's near the equator. I mean, how was that? Getting used to being near the equator and being hot as anything.
Yeah, it's quite hot, and I think that the reason why people don't recognize me that much as they would have in other places of Malaysia is because Kuala Lumpur is a business center, so they're quite used to British, Australians, people from other places. So again, Kuala Lumpur is like, I haven't really explored Malaysia that much in general. But I'm sure I would get a lot of attention if I went to the
a small town or something like that.
Outskirts. Yeah.
This is a good point. We talked about the large oil reserves in Norway and how it funds certain people's pensions and whatnot. You've probably noticed there's been a crisis with the oil price. Are Norwegians panicking? What's this mean? What we've just gone through with the oil for Norway? I mean, it seems like it was something that was kind of backing them up all along, and now maybe it's not as secure as they thought it was.
Yeah, the Norwegian kroner is very closely related to the oil price. It always has been. But actually, even before this coronavirus and also before the oil drop, actually those two happened pretty much at the same time. Then Norwegian kroner already went down quite a bit. But the latest shocks, they have taken a punch on Norwegian kroner. So 2 years ago, maximum 2 years ago, the USD was worth 8 kroner, and now it's worth 10 or more.
There you go. I am looking at the chart, and I do see quite a drop here starting. There it is, March 12th. Yeah, that wasn't very good, but it had dropped. It had started to drop earlier, but whoa, yeah, that's not good. So there you go. People I talk about second tier currencies, and I guess the Norwegian krona would be a second tier type of currency. Those dudes should have got into Bitcoin. Now you got into Bitcoin. You did it. I mean, you're not too concerned about the krona going down because you valued your wealth in Bitcoin all along. So that, you know, we talk about Russia being very oil dependent. Now they don't really produce anything else though. But I mean, right here we're seeing that Norway also, it's you don't want to be associated that much with oil, or with one product. And that is definitely, I'm looking, that is not a pretty looking chart right there, man. That's not good at all. But okay, good. So hopefully some Norwegians, but as you said, Norwegians kind of all go with the flow. They stick with it. They believe in the, it's funny, people make fun of Americans for like believing in the flag and just being hardcore Americans. But it seems like what you're trying to say is Norwegians don't really question authority very much. They don't question the system at all. I mean, what was your political party? What was the political party called that you were a member of?
It was Liberalistene. They were a super small party.
Yep.
And I was in the rally in 2017, and I was out in the streets speaking about what freedom and individualism can mean in terms of actually later revenue and wealth and prosperity. But they didn't want to listen, so they went the opposite direction. The Norwegians went more to the left, to some extreme left parties also, which are really socialistic. And what you mentioned is that the US sometimes uses Norway as an example of why socialism is good. It's not true, because Norway is actually not socialistic. It's actually not. It is very market liberalistic. We trade all the time with other countries, and that's, of course, that's why we do it well, according to my understanding. And also, the Norwegian constitution is based on the U.S. constitution, and people seem to forget a couple of things these later years. And I have actually another thing to add, if I may.
Please.
That if you put, I did the calculation just for fun. If you put all Norwegians along the coast and put them at an equal distance, that equal distance would be 5 meters or more. So Norway has a huge coastline, giving a lot of oil resources, a lot of fishery resources, but it's so little populated. So when you have that kind of wealth and you spread it among so few people, then you almost can't get it wrong.
Well, you can't get it wrong until the oil price crashes. That's why I was asking that other question. I mean, if the oil price doesn't recover, some of these social programs, and they've Norway has paid quite a bit for immigrants to come there too. Correct? That there is an immigration. It's not like Sweden to that level, but there has been some immigration from third world countries there. Correct?
Yeah, you're right. It's very similar to the Sweden way of welcoming immigrants.
Not to that extreme. I mean, maybe the mindset is, but from what I could see, it wasn't as many. I don't know if the sheer.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right. It's not as many, but it's a good second place. It's not that few either. But Norway makes it through because of their all oil fund and their huge resources. So you won't notice the way the society goes down. You won't notice it in Norway so much. But if you go to Oslo in some suburbs or what it's called,
yeah,
then you will not believe that you are in Norway.
Yeah, it's very important for the Americans to realize that in the European countries, the poor immigrants live in the suburbs, because in America, the rich people live in the suburbs. But in like countries like France, there are these huge immigrant suburbs, and obviously you're describing. I didn't see any in Oslo. I didn't see any because I was only in the center really. I saw some immigrants and stuff, but like not major neighborhoods or anything like that. As they live in these, they live further. Europe makes more sense that way. If you're poorer, you live further away. You don't. It's the wealthy who enjoy the convenience of living close to everything. that's just a little comment on the difference between Europe and America there. But I always so who knows now with this if everyone remains paranoid about the virus from now on forever, which I hope they don't, then they're not going to want to live in centralized, crowded areas anymore. God forbid, though.
But you are quite right. I mean, if you go to the main cities in Norway and live at particular places, it will look like Norway is there are only Norwegians. But I had a Scottish couple coming over to Norway, living in that specific suburb, and they called me and asked me, "Is this really Norway?" Yeah. So it depends exactly where you go, right? You will not just like find out based on a like screening by walking around in Oslo. Yeah. But there's a big difference from just 10 years ago also in Oslo. I don't know if you noticed, but there used to be like 99% Norwegians in Oslo.
And now it's not 99 now. That was for sure. Well, it was not, and that was the only time I've ever been in Oslo. I'll say this, in Sweden, in Malmo. So Malmo is not as big of a city as Oslo. So its center isn't as big. So its suburbs are closer to the center. In Malmo was and that was in 2015. In Malmo, I'm seeing Iraqis all over the place. I was seeing all sorts of refugees. I mean, it was quite a sight. You don't, when you think of Sweden, you don't think of what I saw there in Malmo. I did enjoy my time in Malmo, though. I mean, I kind of tell you, I love Scandinavian. I love the fish that you guys eat. I love that stuff, man. Good fish.
But again, you're right that Sweden has been more liberal, but Norway has also been quite liberal. I can tell you that.
Yeah, it's just it's funny what Americans know about certain countries. The right-wing Americans who do talk about immigration a lot, they'll always talk about Sweden. They'll never talk about Norway because they just don't know. They just don't know that it is a similar mentality, but just on a bit of a smaller scale. You're saying it's only a bit of a smaller scale in Norway, which is
yeah. At least there are very big discussions, and it's almost splitting up the nation a little bit in Norway as well, based on how many immigrants we have been taking in. So there is a big debate in Norway. I think maybe like if you look at Norway on the map, it's a ridge. It's a ridge of mountains. We live very spread from each other. So maybe it's just less noticeable if we fill up with immigrants than it is in Sweden. Sweden has much higher population than Norway as well.
I mean, maybe the other thing is, and I'm no expert in this, I don't know if you know, I know that there were some crime issues in Sweden. It definitely made a difference in the crime rates. Did it not make as big of a difference in the crime rates in Norway?
It has made a difference, and this is kind of a war between the alternative media and the mainstream media. Because the mainstream media says that the people from Syria, they were doctors, they were engineers, people that we really needed, which was a direct lie. But still, given, I think it's connected to the media situation we have in Norway, where the media that are connected to the state are so much more wealthy, or it's so much more easy for them. Then most Norwegians will think it too. So
the impression I get of Norwegians is that they're very comfortable, and some of them want to compete, but then a lot of them, it's easy to go left because they're like, well, the government will take care of everything. We've got unlimited resources. We should welcome in new people. We're already living the high life. Let us share. Let us take care of other people. They might care about themselves a little bit, but they're altruistic and let's take care of the world. We have so much oil wealth. We're so comfortable. Let us continue this. And they don't understand there's a limit. There's only so far you can go, and that somebody has to fund it. It's not just the magical oil that's funding it. It is the taxing of the productive people. And it seems like there are a lot of people that they're cool with just living off the government, just either working for the government or getting a government check.
Yeah, that is what annoyed me the most about Norway, to be honest, that when you speak with a Norwegian, then he will be very friendly in the beginning, but if you try to criticize anything against the state, then you're kind of in trouble. And that I didn't notice in the US, because I know in the US it's also polarized between the kind of capitalists and the socialists, but still I could speak much more freely. It was nobody actually judging me. Even a hardcore socialist from California that I met there, she was eager to listen to my views. So that's a good start, right? And in the end, she actually said that she thought I had a beautiful mind, even if she disagreed completely. But in Norway, that has never happened to me.
It's kind of, you can't have political debate there. They're not down with political debate anymore in Norway.
It's very hard when you speak to people to just try to just give the slightest hint that maybe the expenditure is too high. Maybe the government shouldn't put a lot of money into Poland, which is already rich, or into China, or to make golden toilets along the coast. Like maybe they take it a bit too far, but even that is touching some kind of nerve that the Norwegian nervous response will be to say that stop criticizing Norway. UN has said year after year that we are the best country in the world. So just stop it.
We must be the best. Let's keep continuing down this path. So there is a social, the government does back people up. If you fail, the government will take care of you. So that does not really exist in Malaysia, does it? If you fail, you're out on the street, aren't you?
Yeah, that doesn't exist. Actually, it exists on a certain level, but a different level. Like you need to work to succeed here, obviously, like in most countries. So Norway has a big difference there, because sometimes you can almost think that it's better to go on welfare, because the welfare payment is so high that it really doesn't pay off to work, especially after you discount for the amount of time you use during a week. You are spending 40 hours a week for the rest of your life to be working. So how much is that worth? So if that difference between what you work for actively, if the difference between what you get by working and not working is too little, then it scares people like me away.
Yes, the logical people that know that fitting in is overrated. Pound that like button. Okay, so we've covered testosterone, America, feminism. There were some other things you wanted to talk about, actually. So take it away.
Yeah, yeah. I have a positive note about Norway as well. That there must be a reason why a country does well, and it's not only because of the oil and fishery. In my head, it's about the trust between Norwegians, which is actually very easy to spot. If you work in Norway, you will see that the bosses trust you, and they will give you the information you need. And if you take on a task, then you can expect to get paid like internally. Like my company is based on many different departments where you have to pay back and forth, and you can expect that to be paid. So you don't need to go that contractually. You spend a lot of time making a proper contract before you do any work. So that's on the good side of Norway, and that's one of the reasons I think Norway does as well as it does. I also had my main thing that I wanted to give out is for people that does like me. I would be really happy if I can teach people something. So let me try. The Cultural Dimensions is a website. It's made by a Dutch psychologist or something like that. In the end, it's so accurate, and I would like to talk a little bit about how accurate I found that site.
Yes, please, and it will be linked to below. Remember to send me that link again, so I'll put it beneath there, so everyone can see it.
Yeah, sure I will. So that is something for everybody wanting to move out. Check that site first, because then you know what you're moving to. So on masculinity dimension, it also defines it very well, that masculinity is to strive for success, is to stand out, it's to strive to be the winner. While the feminine is more the quality of life, and that if you stand out from the crowd, that's not admirable. And Norway then scores 8 out of 100, which confirms a lot of what we have already talked about. So Norway is one of the most feminine countries in the world. It's actually the second most feminine after Sweden. And then you can watch this site, and it even explains like what's the reason for these rankings, and it fits really well. So Malaysia on the masculinity is 50%. Not really a huge difference, but I knew that I was going to a country that at least more masculine than Norway. Then you can look at other parameters. For example, the power distance is a very interesting parameter because I think it tells something about how much differences are acceptable in a society. And in Norway, the score is 31 out of 100, which is quite low. And in Malaysia, it's 100 out of 100. And by reading that up front, I knew what to expect. And it is so right. Like when I come up to my apartment, the guards are saying, hello, boss. And they actually seem happy with it. I don't feel like they are really jealous, which is so awesome. Like they just accept that I am actually the one paying their salary. And even if they earn 1/10 maybe of what I do, then they're just happy about calling me boss, and they're smiling and things like that. But and also in the workplace, you can see that it's much more hierarchical. That the boss is the boss, and maybe Malaysia takes it a bit too far, but maybe Norway takes it a bit too far also in the other direction. And like in Norway, it's not really regarded well upon if you think that you are different from others, even if you are. So a typical boss at work in Norway will always call you into discussions about like what should we do, and even high-level strategy discussions that you don't really want to be involved in. Then he will ask you, so you will not actually feel like he's your boss at all.
Wow, that is that's interesting. It seems like there's a lack of decisiveness there. In other words, that in your terms, to be masculine, you got to be able to make a decision on your own sometimes, basically.
Yes, so I think that the power distance dimension that I just discussed is very linked to the masculinity. Oh, I haven't checked it. I'm not that Dutch philosopher that made this site, but of course it must be interlinked. Yes. So you're right that in Norway you will see who is the boss, and the decisions go much faster in other countries. And this is something I have read about in the media. Or Danish workers, even Denmark, which is not so different from Norway. They come to Norway and they think like, wow, it takes so slow to make a decision here.
Pound that like button. Yeah, just drinking water here. It's just water, people. All right. Well, Morten, it's been great to catch up on you and give everybody a different style of show here beyond Bitcoin bonus show. We've done this with the Bitcoin Rabbi before. Yeah, we do things. You never know what you're going to get here, dudes. So pound that like button. Anything else you wanted to say? Any conclusionary thoughts? Anything?
Yes, I would like to bring up another site also, because
yes,
the one I mentioned is just 1 out of 2 that you should always check when moving from a country to another, in my head, because it just matches so well. It's incredible. So the other one is Index of Economic Freedom. And the founder of this site, their base premise is that we have less people that are poor now than we did 50 years ago. And we have less people starving than we had 50 years ago. And this is because of the economic freedom, because economic freedom just makes a society prosperous. So if you don't mind, then I'll just talk about a couple of points there that I noticed between Norway and Malaysia.
Please.
So Malaysia scores higher than Norway. 4 places higher than Norway, which you wouldn't necessarily expect because Malaysia is not a Western country, right? But still, they score higher because Norway has this extreme government spending. They pay for like everything. It's so ingrained in the system, and this site kind of warns against the consequences of that. The equivalent tax burden, of course, is high. The labor market is not very, very free. And all of these points is just perfectly reflected on that site with the excellent explanation. And Malaysia has some downsides too, that, for example, on the government integrity, they don't score that high. And I read about it in Malaysian news as well, that they have a problem with corruption, which is not just a small problem. It's a big one. But even then they score 4 places higher than Norway in the end, because Norway has so many flaws when it comes to economic freedom.
Now, I do like how you mentioned before that it seems like there is in so-called income inequality, but people aren't worried, at least in Malaysia, at least the dudes you encountered, they're not worried that you're making 10 times the amount of money that they are. They're just happy they're making money, right?
Yeah, and of course, I think that's reasonable, because if they didn't have that work as guards at my apartment complex, they would work with something that pays them less. So I'm really happy to see that people are just respecting that people are different. Like, they don't have engineering degree. Maybe they weren't that ambitious. Maybe they were, but just that acceptance of differences is really wonderful. It's really fantastic. It's one of the best things about moving.
Well, I think that it's a cultural thing that people there appreciate just having a job and being able to make money. And I think in certain Western countries, they take it for granted. Like, well, if I didn't have a job, I'll still make money because the government will send me money. There seems to be more appreciation of having a job and knowing that, you've moved up. It could be much worse. Being a doorman at a building, that's not bad. I mean, compare that to some, working at a sewage facility or something like that. It's horrifying. But again, in the Western countries, they're so comfortable, they can worry about income inequality and say, well, wait a second, it's unfair the CEO makes that much money. I mean, it's envy. There doesn't seem to be envy there, I guess is what I'm boiling it down to also.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. Like, if the money for doing nothing is high enough, then I think you will develop some kind of jealousy, which was not supposed to be there in the first place.
Yeah. So anything more about that site you were just discussing that you wanted to add, the comparisons?
No, those are the 2 sites that I just really recommend everybody in the same situation as me to check out.
I mean, I guess the conclusionary question is, people that live in other Scandinavian countries, if they're not leftist, do you recommend they move out? Do you have an age limit? Do you say, hey, well, you're young, you really need to try it. If you're 25 and you're frustrated, get the heck out. But if you're 40, maybe it's too late. Or I mean, what's your take on it?
Yeah, and that's adventurous spectre of it. It's more to it than just getting lower taxes. It's an experience, and it will really fill your mind with interesting stuff. One is reading about all the countries, but a totally other thing is actually being there and knowing that it's true. So
another important thing, did you visit Malaysia before you moved there?
Yes, I visited there, but that was after saying yes to the job. So.
Okay. But would you advise others try to? We see that we've got a problem with travel now, but let's say travel gets back to normal. would you say it for the young people to at least take a peek at first, or do what you did?
That's a good question. It depends a little bit how dissatisfied you are with your own country. Like if you're a leftist, as you said, then probably you should just stay in Norway, Sweden, Denmark. I mean, then that's your country of happiness. But if you're interested in exploring something else and you are actually, let's say, more competitive, then you could almost go anywhere. And Malaysia is one of the best ones because they don't have capital gains tax. It's really a big thing that they don't have that.
Okay. So, conclusion: you're enjoying your time in Malaysia quite a bit, and you recommend it to others with open minds that aren't trying to fit in, that don't need a government backstop, who want to compete and not complain. So, very, very good, Morten.
Yeah.
One real quick thing. In Norway, you knew other dudes that had Bitcoin. That I'm pretty sure of, from what I recall. Do you know anyone in Malaysia? What's the Bitcoin scene like in Malaysia?
It's no scene at all, unfortunately. I have looked for events, but nothing.
This is very interesting because it's there's personal responsibility there, but Bitcoin is a Western thing, man. So far, it really is. It has not caught on everywhere that it should catch on. I mean, it should be big in Malaysia.
Yeah, exactly. So you can start wondering if the taxes are so low here just because it has always been that way, or whether there is a mindset behind it. And the latest also coronavirus tells me that there is no like conscious mindset behind the lower taxes, unfortunately, because they don't really respect the individual freedom as much as I hoped.
Yeah. So when the going got tough, some the authoritarians came out basically, and that was a little unexpected. But because the tradition has been low taxes for so long, it's low taxes now. So as long as it's low taxes and it is what it is for now, it's better than Norway. But I guess the warning sign is like, oh, wait a second, it could suddenly change. I mean, with this virus, you saw a whole side of it that you did not know about beforehand. So
yeah, and it doesn't really change the conclusion of whether or not to go out and see the world, because you should do that. You could even move back if you want to. I mean, it's no one time of a life decision. So
yeah, you still got your Norwegian passport. I mean, yeah, you could still get back there easily. God forbid if it really became some totalitarian regime suddenly. You never know in these days and age. You never know. So, anyway, on that note, strong hand. Keep hold of that Bitcoin, definitely, even if the Malaysians aren't down with it for some reason. And Norwegian people keep on buying that Bitcoin, and maybe try to fitting in is overrated. Get some political debate over there sometimes. And if you're frustrated, as I've said to anyone on this planet, if the going ever gets tough and you have Bitcoin, you can always just leave with your Bitcoin and start off someplace else. I mean, basically that's what you've done. So you're living the adventure right now, Morten. So good job. Thank you for sharing your story here. And I hope everybody enjoyed this Beyond Bitcoin bonus show. I'm Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, Disrupt Meister. You get a new show every day. You might get 2 this day. Who knows how many shows they're going to be. But see you later, disruptmeister.com. And check out all the links below. Morten will give me some more links to share with you. And again, thanks a lot, Morten. See you later. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.